All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are really pulling back the curtain on something fascinating. A financial secret that honestly separates the wealthy from just about everyone else. It's this strategy they use to live, well, lavishly, without ever having to sell their assets. And they do it using a tool that traps most of us: debt.
Think about it. We're all taught that debt is, well, it's a four-letter word, right? It's kind of like the monster under the bed that keeps a lot of us up at night. But what if I told you that for the super rich, that same monster is actually a golden ticket? I mean, how is that even possible? How can the exact same financial tool be a cage for one person and a key for another? Okay, so this slide right here, this really gets to the heart of it all. On one side, you've got the world that, most of us live in. It's income-backed debt. We get a paycheck, the government takes its slice right off the top, and then we use whatever's left to pay for stuff that, let's be honest, usually loses value, like a new car or things we put on a credit card. But then, look at the other side. The wealthy are playing a completely different game. They're not borrowing against their paycheck. No, they're borrowing against their wealth, their assets. And that changes everything.
And here's why that's a trap for so many people. It all comes down to one little word: risk. See, when you walk into a bank and ask for a loan, they're looking at but what they're really looking at is the risk that your paycheck could just disappear. What if you lose your job? That's why consumer loans have such high interest rates. The bank is literally pricing in that risk. In a way, they're betting against your future, and they're making you pay for that bet.
So how do the rich flip this whole system on its head? I mean, what if there was a way to make the bank see you not as a liability, not as a risk, but as a golden opportunity? Well, that's exactly what the wealthy do. They have a totally different strategy.
And it all starts with something called an asset-backed loan. Now, this is where the magic really happens. With this kind of loan, you're not walking into the bank asking for money to buy. Instead, you're showing them all the valuable stuff you already own. Your stocks, your real estate, your business. The whole conversation it shifts. It goes from, so what do you do for a living, to, wow, what's in your portfolio?
So how does this actually work in practice? Well, it's a surprisingly simple four-step process. First, and this is the important part, you build a base of productive assets. We're talking stocks, real estate, things that grow in value. Step 2, you borrow just a small fraction of their value. Then, and this is key, you often only pay the interest on that loan. And finally, as your assets continue to grow in value, guess what? You can refinance or even expand the loan. It becomes this incredible virtuous cycle that lets you get cash from your wealth without ever actually selling it.
And we're not talking about borrowing a ton of money here. Actually, it's the opposite. The less you borrow compared to what you own, the better. A typical loan-to-value ratio, you'll hear it called LTV, is around 20%, and banks consider that ultra safe. So think about it. If you have $1 million in assets, you're only borrowing $200,000 against it. For a bank, that is a total no-brainer. They know that even if your portfolio takes a massive hit, they are still absolutely getting their money back. And that safety for them, well, that means rock-bottom interest rates for you.
But hold on, because here's the real kicker. You ready for this? That money you just borrowed, it's not considered income, so you don't pay any taxes on it. Yeah, you heard me right. This is how you can access massive amounts of cash, tax-free liquidity to live on, without ever triggering a capital gains tax by selling anything. It is a massive, massive advantage, and it's one of the key reasons the wealthy can grow their fortunes so effectively. Okay, so how is all of this even possible? It's not just about, finding the right banker or owning the right stocks. This strategy works because it's built on top of some fundamental, unseen economic rules. It's about understanding the hidden logic of the game, these powerful forces that shape our entire world, often in ways we don't even notice.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. That's great, but I'm not a millionaire. I don't have a huge portfolio to borrow against. So does that mean you're just stuck in that first world of income-backed debt forever? Well, not necessarily. Because here's the thing, once you understand these underlying rules of the economic game, you can start playing it differently.
There's this famous story where the Soviet leader Gorbachev asked Margaret Thatcher, how do you make sure people in London get food? And her answer was amazing. She just said, I don't. Prices do. And that really gets at this idea that there are these invisible forces, these signals that govern our world any central planner ever could. Our whole financial system works the same way. There are forces like prices and incentives that are just incredibly powerful.
And you can see what happens when we try to fight against these forces. Take a look at this case from Maryland. The plan was pretty simple. Raise taxes on millionaires to get about $100 million in new revenue. That was the intention. But the incentive it created to just leave. And they did. Thousands of them left. The result?
Maryland didn't gain money, it actually lost over $250 million in tax revenue. It's a perfect example of how incentives, not intentions, drive results. So, okay, how do you learn to read these codes? How do you start seeing the signals that costs and prices are sending all the time? It's actually not as complicated as it sounds. It really just starts with understanding a few core ideas. First up is this idea of opportunity cost. And look, it sounds kind of academic, but it's super simple. Every single choice you make has a cost. And I'm not just talking about the price tag. The real cost is what you have to give up to get it. Let's use an example. Say you're thinking about buying a nice car, maybe a BMW for $50,000, and you look at your bank account and think, yep, I can afford the $50,000 price tag. But see, that's the price, not the true cost. The true cost is what that 50 grand could have turned into over, say, 30 years if you had invested it instead. We're talking maybe $250,000. That's the opportunity you gave up. That is the real cost. And once you see that, you start looking at every decision differently.
And this same logic applies when we mess with price signals. Take rent control, for example. The intention is great, right? Make housing more affordable for people. But what often happens is the exact opposite. By forcing prices down, you remove the incentive for builders to build new apartments and for landlords to maintain the ones they have. So pretty soon, you get a housing shortage. And who gets hurt the most? The very people the policy was designed to help, because now there's not enough housing to go around. It's another case of good intentions leading to bad results because the underlying signals were ignored.
So what does all this mean for you? Where's your real financial power? Look, you don't have to be a millionaire to start thinking like one. Your power comes from understanding these foundational rules and thinking like an economist in your own life. It really just boils down to a few key truths. First, remember that every choice has a trade-off. There's always an opportunity cost. Second, rewards and incentives matter way more than good intentions. Third, prices aren't good or bad. They're just honest signals. They're information. To earn more, you've got to create more value. And finally, instead of trying to fix what's broken, it's often better to just double down on what's already working. These are the core ideas that can really change your financial game. So I'll leave you with this one question to think about. The next time you're about to make a big financial decision, just pause and ask yourself, what is this really costing me? Because once you start seeing those hidden costs, you can't be so easily manipulated. And that is the key to unlocking a totally different financial